Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a festival day quite unlike any that we've had before. And I hope that it will be just a short space before we can have a proper festival day when we will gather at Murfield. Father Nicholas has asked if I might just say something about the kind of music we sing at Murfield, why we sing it. That's always an opportunity that I'm welcome. It may mean I say things that I've said to many of you before in different contexts, but it probably doesn't hurt to repeat things. The first thing I want to say is you have to kind of get into a different kind of mindset to understand all this. Because when we think about music we like, it's very often because it's got a very strong rhythm, a strong beat. And we've just been hearing on the radio today that in lockdown, we wanted more upbeat music to kind of encourage us. And so songs that have been released into the charts in the last few weeks have been getting faster. The average now is about 120 beats per minute, which is quite fast, and it kind of gets our juices going, it gets us excited. So a strong rhythmic beat in music is something that many times we take for granted, we expect it to be there. And the second thing is we look for often is a good tune. Now, we have to start by saying that the kind of music we use most of the time at Murfield doesn't have either of those things. It doesn't have a strong beat, there's no drum section going on, and it doesn't have particularly memorable melodies, not great tunes that you sing in the bath. But of course there's something, for me, much more important behind it all, and that is the way in which the music we use, the singing we do, helps pull us into the text of the scriptures. The whole tradition of Christian chant arose from a recognition that the faith, the core of our belief, is something so important that it needs to be honoured and handled with great reverence and care. And one of the ways you do that is to sing it. Because when you take any text and sing it, it takes a little bit longer than saying it. To say something, there's always a danger that you slide over bits of it. Indeed, you may find that you miss odd words in what I'm saying now because I don't take enough care. I just slide over them in the way that we talk. But when you sing, you have to take much more care to articulate things, to pronounce things carefully, and treat the text with a different kind of seriousness. So the whole tradition of Christian chant grows out of a recognition that what we have to sing about is something of earth-shattering importance. And so this great tradition of the chant grew up, belonging to both East and West. It only gradually becomes divided into two distinct traditions, the tradition of the East, which we associate with the Orthodox Church, and the tradition of the West, that we associate with the Catholic Church of the West. But why do we go on singing music, some of which goes back certainly to the 8th century, the 7th century, some of it probably to the 6th and the 5th century, some of it even to the 4th and the 3rd century. Some of it may even go back almost as far as Jesus himself. Why do we go on singing that? Haven't we grown up a bit since then? Don't we have better tunes and better songs? And the simple answer is no. Because in that chant tradition, which is formed roughly between the 4th and the 10th centuries, we have a quite unique tradition of paying attention to the texts of Scripture and developing all kinds of ways of helping that attention to Scripture to become accessible to those who sing the chant. And here's the next really important thing. This is a kind of music not really to be listened to, but to be sung. And as soon as I say that, I have to acknowledge a difficulty and a weakness. Musicians always like to be doing something a bit more complicated. And it was true with the chant as well, that some of those who were creating the chant did enjoy doing it, and they started creating chants that were very complex. And then, of course, the more complex it gets, the fewer people are actually able to sing it. And that is a bit of a problem. But the essence of it is a music, not even really a music at all, but a way of articulating the text, which helps you understand it better, because it helps you take the text into yourself. So that's the absolutely fundamental reason why we use the kind of music we do, and why we go on doing it after all these years, and why there is nothing that has been able to take its place, nothing able to do that particular job better. And then there are some really important ways in which this particular kind of musical tradition helps us. You think about the church's year, and we're used to the notion that there are different colours for different seasons. You think of the long green season that we're in now, the Sundays after Trinity, when the church's vestments are all green. And you contrast that with the time of Pentecost when they're red, or Passiontide when they're red, or Christmas and Easter when they're white and gold. And colour, the use of colour in that way is very important, but it just sends out a signal, and you know when you go into church that's what's happening. Or on a weekday celebration, when the celebrant comes in with a red chasuble, well, you think, oh, it's a martyr today, and you see if you can remember which martyr it is. And something very similar happens in the musical world too, so that the chant tradition develops melodies that are only sung at certain seasons or for certain feasts. And as soon as you hear a particular little snippet of melody, you think, oh, that's All Saints' Day, or that's Advent, or that's Lent. Immediately, you're given a kind of tag to hang on to. You can find your bearings, you know where you are, and it helps you be grounded in the season or the feast. It helps you pay attention. It helps you to be focused. And you don't even really notice the way these signals are working until you do find yourself suddenly, you hear a melody perhaps on the radio or something, and you think, what on earth is he doing playing that now? That belongs to Lent. Why are they playing that now? It's the middle of the summer holidays. And that indicates how successful it is in just saying, this belongs to this and not to that. Now, there are other ways in which we notice this. I mean, if you heard the tune for Once in Royal David's City in the middle of July, you would think there's something very funny here, because that's a Christmas hymn. But there are very few tunes now that are that kind of locked into a season or a time. We're rather more used, particularly as the kind of hymn repertoire has been shrinking. We've been used to using the few tunes that we do know well lots and lots of times, so we sing them for lots more words, and that association has got rather stretched. With the chant, it's still very much there. You have certain melodies, and as soon as you hear them, you know where you are. So if you hear, you know immediately that's Advent. That's the office hymn at Evensong, Vespers, all through Advent. And if you hear, you know that that is the very wonderful office hymn for the saints, for All Saints' Day, to a melody which is not very widespread. It's a melody which is found in the York manuscripts. So it's an English melody, but nonetheless associated with All Saints, only sung at All Saints' Side, so you find your bearings through that melody. So that's a key way in which the chant works. But it works also by rhythm. We began by talking about the way that much of the music we value because of its strong beat. And the chant isn't like that. But it does have a deep underlying rhythm. And sometimes this is expressed as a kind of being in tune with the rhythm of the earth, or with the song of heaven. These are rather poetic ways of putting it, and they're a bit tricky to manage, but there is something about that sense of discovering, as you sing, an almost imperceptible rhythm underneath the chant, which is holding you, helping you again to focus, to be still, to be attentive, to listen. And it's one of the reasons why I think lots of people say that they find listening to the chant very calming. To the extent that my brother-in-law has always said that he likes listening to it if he's stuck in a traffic jam, because it helps counter road rage. I'm sure that's true, but it is because of that deep rhythm which holds us, which gives us shape, gives us a context. So we have these various elements. We have the signals which help us find our bearings in the church's year or on a particular feast day, that kind of being located in time. But the rhythm which comes out not in a strong beat, but a very, very subtle underlying rhythm, helps us to be grounded and focused. And that brings us back to this whole business of the relationship with the text that I was talking about at the beginning. What the chant does is give us a space in which to chew on normally a biblical text. Occasionally it's a text that's rather more inspired by the scriptures, not directly in the scriptures. Most of it is just the scriptures straight. And of course, the bulk of it, day after day after day, is the Psalms. So what it does is to give you a space to articulate that text, to hear it yourself, to let it enter into you, to slide down inside you, to be processed inside, and then as you sing it, for you to hand it over to others, both those who are present with you, but also to all those who are bound together with you in the prayer. So you take the text in, you think about it, and as you think about it, as you meditate on it, so your appreciation for its meaning grows. And the meaning ceases to be the surface meaning of the words. It's something deeper again, like that underlying rhythm. It is that sense of the meaning which is not just the literal meaning, not just the various layers of interpretation that have been put on that text by the different commentators throughout the centuries, but it is the meaning that the Spirit of God is showing to us in this moment. All of that is going on, and that's the reason that we go on singing the chant, because it is the way in which we are enabled to be held in the presence of God so that the Spirit can teach us and lead us into all the truth. And in essence, all the singing can be reduced to a single note. If you take something like the Psalms, you know that they have slightly different shapes. It's what we call the psalm tones and their endings. So you have one that just is quite simple. That's probably the most common. But in the end, even though that itself is very simple, you can strip it down even further and say that it's just the one note. And it is, as it were, as though when you start singing the Psalms, you're listening and you can hear. You can hear it already going on. You can already hear the angels singing the text of the Psalm, and you just join in. And the little wiggles at the beginning and the end are ways, again, of helping us get our bearings and give it some shape. But the thing that matters is that hearing that one note, and just joining in with it, joining in and out, making a sound, retreating into silence, speaking, listening, singing, listening, attending, and growing in understanding. It's all really very simple. And it is surprising how, despite the amount of repetition, it is never boring. You don't get tired of this kind of repetition because it is always an invitation into the newness of God and the newness of the Spirit. So I hope that although today is a very different day from a usual festival, I hope it will nonetheless be a time of refreshment and a time of celebration together with the community at Murfield. Every blessing to all of you.